The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the most diverse gathering of intelligent life in the known universe. Hundreds of species filled the crystalline halls, their forms ranging from towering insectoids with chitinous armor to floating gas beings that shimmered like captured starlight. The air thrummed with anticipation, though not the good kind. Council Prime Valerian stood at the center podium, his tall frame casting long shadows across the polished floor. His skin shifted colors slowly, a sign of deep contemplation among his people. Today marked another attempt at what had become known throughout the galaxy as the impossible trial. Another species has requested the test, announced his aide, a creature with multiple tentacles that writhed nervously as he spoke. They call themselves humans. A ripple of interest passed through the assembly. New species always drew attention, especially when they were foolish enough to attempt the trial that had broken the spirits of over 3,000 civilizations. The test itself was deceptively simple. Survive 30 standard days on Tormentus Prime, a world so hostile that even its name made seasoned space travelers shudder. The planet was a nightmare of extremes where temperatures could freeze your blood solid one moment and boil it the next. The atmosphere shifted between toxic and corrosive without warning. The ground itself seemed alive with malice, splitting open without notice to reveal pools of acid that could dissolve starship hulls. But the worst part was the wildlife. Evolution on Tormentus Prime had followed only one rule: kill or be killed. Every creature, from the smallest insect to the massive predators that stalked the wasteland, existed solely to end the lives of anything else that moved. For over 2 millennia, species after species had attempted the trial. The proud Zentari Empire, conquerors of 12 star systems, had lasted exactly 4 hours before their warriors broke down sobbing. The brilliant Nexus Collective, whose minds could process information at quantum speeds, had calculated their own doom within minutes and begged for evacuation. The record holder was the Corvan military caste, genetically engineered supersoldiers who had never known defeat in battle. They managed 6 days and 13 hours before their commander sent a transmission that simply said, "Get us out of here. Please." Council Prime Valerian had administered this test for nearly 2 centuries. He had watched as the greatest warriors in the galaxy reduced themselves to whimpering children. He had seen brilliant scientists abandon all logic in favor of pure terror. He had witnessed proud civilizations that spanned multiple worlds beg for mercy after just hours on Tormentus Prime. The test served a purpose beyond simple cruelty. The Galactic Council needed to know that any new member species possessed the strength and determination to face the unknown. The universe was vast and dangerous, filled with threats that could destroy entire worlds. If a species could not handle 30 days on one hostile planet, how could they be trusted with the safety of thousands of worlds? But lately, Valerian had begun to wonder if the test was simply impossible. Perhaps they were asking too much. Perhaps no species in the universe could actually complete it. "Tell me about these humans," Valerian said to his aide. The tentacled being consulted his datapad, several appendages working simultaneously. "They originate from a planet called Earth. The classification system lists it as..." He paused, double-checking the information. "Class 12 Deathworld." A shocked silence fell over the chamber. Class 12 was the highest danger rating in the galactic database. Worlds with that classification were considered uninhabitable even with full environmental protection. Most species needed special suits just to orbit such planets safely. "That must be an error," Valerian said slowly. "No intelligent life could evolve on a Class 12 world." "I checked 3 times," the aide replied. "The data is correct. Their homeworld features extreme weather, violent seismic activity, dangerous radiation levels, toxic plant life, and predators that actively hunt intelligent prey." Around the chamber, representatives from various species began murmuring among themselves. How could anything survive on such a world, let alone develop civilization? "Perhaps," suggested Ambassador Thrix of the Peaceful Assembly, "these humans have evolved some special protection? Natural armor? Toxic resistance?" The aide consulted his data again. No unusual physical adaptations noted. They appear to be standard carbon-based bipeds. No natural weapons, no armor plating, no environmental protections. Their skin is actually quite thin and vulnerable. This information caused even more confusion. If these humans were so physically unremarkable, how had they survived on a world that sounded more hostile than Tormentus Prime itself? "Show them in," Valerian decided. He needed to see these creatures for himself. The chamber doors opened again, and 3 figures walked inside. They moved with confident strides, their eyes scanning the assembled aliens with obvious curiosity rather than fear or awe. The lead figure was a female with graying hair pulled back neatly. Behind her walked a male in military dress and another female who seemed barely able to contain her excitement at seeing so many different species. "Honored Council," the lead human said, her voice carrying easily through the vast space, "I am Ambassador Margaret Thompson. Humanity requests the honor of attempting your membership trial." Valerian studied these strange creatures. They looked remarkably fragile. Their skin appeared soft and easily damaged. Their eyes were completely exposed, with no protective covering. They had no visible weapons or defensive features. Yet something about their demeanor suggested they were completely unconcerned about facing the trial that had destroyed the confidence of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. "You understand what you are requesting?" Valerian asked carefully. "Tormentus Prime has defeated every species that has ever attempted this trial." Margaret smiled, an expression that translated across most species as confidence or amusement. "We have reviewed the available data on the planet. It sounds like it will be challenging." The word challenging sent another wave of whispers through the assembly. Previous species had used words like impossible, terrifying, and soul-destroying to describe the same data these humans called challenging. Valerian realized he was about to witness either the quickest failure in the trial's history, or something completely unprecedented. Either way, the galaxy was watching. The preparation chamber buzzed with nervous energy as council technicians worked around 12 human volunteers. The viewing galleries high above filled rapidly with representatives from hundreds of worlds, all eager to witness what many expected to be the shortest trial attempt in galactic history. Council Prime Valerian watched from his observation deck as the humans went through their equipment checks. He had expected them to request advanced technology, genetic modifications, or at least several months of specialized training. Instead, Ambassador Thompson had simply asked for basic survival gear and 12 volunteers from Earth. The volunteers themselves were unlike anything the Council had seen before. Previous species had sent their greatest warriors, their most brilliant scientists, or their most advanced cyborgs. The humans had brought what appeared to be a random collection of civilians. Dr. Robert Hayes looked more like a fisherman than a scientist as he examined water purification tablets with casual interest. His weathered face and calloused hands spoke of years spent in harsh conditions, but he seemed completely relaxed as he prepared for what others considered certain death. "These bacterial filters are interesting," he commented to Dr. Alice Foster, a woman whose pale complexion suggested she spent most of her time in cold climates. "Though probably unnecessary. I've drunk water from Siberian ice lakes that would kill most people." Alice nodded while checking her thermal gear. "The temperature readings remind me of Antarctic winter research. At least this planet has breathable atmosphere in some areas." Nearby, Tom Bradley was studying topographical maps with the enthusiasm of someone planning a vacation. The mountain climber's scarred hands traced elevation lines as he identified potential climbing routes. "These cliff faces look similar to K2, he told Jack Williams, whose survival expertise had taken him through Earth's most dangerous wilderness areas. "Should be fun to navigate." The council members exchanged worried glances. Where previous species had shown mounting terror during preparation, these humans displayed what could only be described as excitement. Council Aide Therion approached Valerian nervously. "Perhaps we should explain the casualty statistics again?" The Morvan Confederacy lasted only 3 hours before their leader went completely insane. Colonel James Mitchell looked up from cleaning his weapon, a simple projectile rifle that had amused the Council's weapons specialists. "We understand the risks," he said calmly. "Every one of us has volunteered for dangerous assignments before." Sarah Bennett, whose background in nuclear engineering had taken her into radioactive zones that would kill most beings instantly, nodded agreement. "This is just another hazardous environment operation. We train for this kind of thing." The quantum viewing feeds activated as billions across the galaxy tuned in to watch. Betting pools opened on every civilized world, with odds makers predicting complete failure within hours. The most optimistic estimates gave the humans 12 hours before they would be reduced to gibbering terror like all the others. Dr. Helen Carter, a geologist who had spent years studying active volcanoes, peered at the atmospheric readings with professional interest. "Fascinating sulfur concentrations," she mused. "The chemical composition is similar to volcanic vents I've worked near. This should be educational." The alien technicians stared at her in amazement. No previous species had ever described Tormentus Prime as educational. As the transport ship descended toward the planet's surface, the human volunteers gathered around the viewports to watch their destination. Tormentus Prime filled the screen like a vision from a nightmare. Violent storms raged across its surface. Volcanic activity painted the landscape in hellish reds and oranges. Lightning crackled through toxic clouds that could strip flesh from bone. Beautiful in its own way, murmured Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a botanist whose specialty in extreme plant life had taken her to places where even wearing protective gear was dangerous. Look at that geological diversity. The alien crew members backed away from her, certain they were transporting beings who had lost their minds before even reaching the planet. Medical Officer Dr. Peter Wright was reviewing the atmospheric composition data with scientific curiosity. The toxic elements are interesting, he noted. Some of these compounds might have pharmaceutical applications if properly processed. Animal behaviorist Dr. Susan Clark was studying footage of Tormentus Prime's predators with the same expression most people reserved for cute pets. The hunting patterns are sophisticated, she observed. These creatures have evolved complex social structures. Fascinating adaptation to extreme conditions. Mark Thompson, whose engineering background focused on solar power systems, was already calculating energy collection possibilities from the planet's frequent electrical storms. All that atmospheric activity could provide unlimited power if we set up the collectors properly. The transport ship's captain, a veteran of countless dangerous missions, had never seen anything like this. Every species he had delivered to Tormentus Prime had spent their final hours in prayer, meditation, or desperate preparation rituals. These humans were treating the descent like a sightseeing tour. As the landing pods were prepared, Ambassador Thompson made her final address to the Council. "We appreciate this opportunity to prove humanity's worthiness for galactic citizenship," she said formally. Then her expression relaxed into something approaching amusement. "Our volunteers are looking forward to the challenge." The word challenge echoed through the observation chambers. Previous species had used terms like doom, nightmare, and inevitable death to describe the same trial. The betting odds shifted rapidly as gamblers across the galaxy tried to understand these strange creatures. Some began placing wild bets on the possibility that humans might actually survive longer than expected. Most still predicted failure within hours, but a few bold speculators wondered if these Deathworlders might be different. The landing pods sealed with hydraulic hisses, carrying 12 humans toward a planet that had broken the will of every intelligent species in the galaxy. As they descended through Tormentus Prime's toxic atmosphere, the volunteers were heard laughing and making jokes about the rough ride. Council Prime Valerian watched the descent with growing fascination. In 2 millennia of administering this trial, he had never seen anything like these humans. They were either the most foolishly optimistic species in the galaxy, or something entirely unprecedented was about to happen. The pods struck Tormentus Prime's surface with impacts that would have shattered most beings' bones. The external sensors immediately registered conditions that had driven warriors to madness within minutes. And from inside the first pod, clearly audible over the communication system, came Dr. Robert Hayes's first words upon setting foot on the deadliest planet in known space. "Well, this is refreshing." The landing pods crashed into Tormentus Prime's surface with tremendous force, sending shockwaves through the rocky ground. Immediately, howling winds filled with razor-sharp particles began battering the metal hulls. The external temperature gauge flickered wildly between readings that would freeze water solid and others hot enough to melt lead. Toxic gas warnings screamed from every sensor. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched their viewing screens with morbid fascination. This was always the moment when previous species realized the true horror of what they had volunteered for. The moment when proud warriors became terrified children and brilliant minds shut down in pure panic. The first pod hatch opened with a grinding sound of stressed metal. Dr. Robert Hayes stepped out into the alien hellscape, looked around at the swirling toxic storms and jagged landscape, and made his first recorded observation. "Well, this is refreshing." In the Council observation ship orbiting high above, several delegates required immediate medical attention. The word refreshing had never been used to describe Tormentus Prime before. Robert pulled his simple breathing mask into place and began walking across terrain that had sent the galaxy's greatest explorers screaming back to their ships. His movements were calm and purposeful, like someone taking a morning stroll through a familiar neighborhood. The second pod opened, and Dr. Alice Foster emerged into wind speeds that could knock over armored vehicles. She steadied herself against the gusts, checked her equipment, and made her first report. "Temperature variance is significant, but manageable. Reminds me of weather station duty in northern Alaska." Council Prime Valerian stared at his monitors in disbelief. The human's vital signs showed normal stress levels. Previous species at this point had heart rates approaching fatal levels and brain activity patterns indicating complete psychological breakdown. Tom Bradley's pod cracked open like an egg, and the mountain climber stepped onto ground that shifted and crumbled with every step. Where previous species had built elaborate shelters that inevitably collapsed, Tom simply found a natural windbreak behind a rock formation and began setting up basic camp. Terrain is unstable but workable, he reported cheerfully. The handholds are decent once you figure out which rocks are solid. Kind of like free climbing during an earthquake. The comparison to recreational activities was beginning to disturb the galactic audience. Several species had cancelled their own viewing parties because the content was becoming too upsetting to watch. By the end of the first day, something unprecedented was happening. Instead of huddling together in terror like every previous species, the humans had spread out across a wide area and were systematically exploring their environment. Each volunteer moved with confidence, applying skills learned on their impossibly dangerous homeworld to conditions that had driven seasoned warriors insane. Jack Williams, the survival expert, had done something no previous species had ever attempted. He was actively hunting the local wildlife. The creatures that had torn apart power-armored soldiers were being tracked and studied like ordinary game animals. The predator patterns are predictable once you understand their territory markers, Jack reported while field dressing something that looked like a six-legged bear with acid claws. Plus they taste decent if you cook them right. Bit like wild boar. The fact that a human was eating Tormentus Prime's deadly fauna caused panic in several council chambers. Emergency meetings were called to discuss whether the humans might actually be some kind of previously unknown superpredators. Dr. Helen Carter made the day's most shocking discovery. She had found the geological fault lines that caused the planet's frequent devastating earthquakes, and instead of avoiding them like every sane being would do, she was studying them with professional interest. The seismic activity follows clear patterns, she explained while standing directly over a crack that had swallowed entire previous expeditions. If you understand the underlying forces, you can predict the safe zones. It's quite elegant, really. Sarah Bennett had shocked the council's technical staff by requesting additional equipment. Not for protection or escape, but because she had found naturally occurring radioactive materials that could power a small city. She was treating lethal radiation levels like an engineering opportunity. The isotope concentrations are remarkable, she reported while working in an area that would have killed most beings within minutes. With proper collection methods, this could revolutionize galactic power generation. By the third day, the impossible was becoming routine. Dr. Peter Wright had established a medical station and was treating minor injuries with supplies that included local plant materials. Plants that previous species had classified as touch equals instant death, were being used as antiseptics and pain relievers. The biochemistry is fascinating, Peter explained while applying a poultice made from what looked like thorny deathgrass. These compounds could lead to major medical breakthroughs if we can synthesize them safely. The galactic audience was no longer watching a survival trial. They were witnessing something that defied everything they thought they knew about life in extreme environments. These humans weren't just surviving Tormentus Prime, they were treating it like a challenging research expedition. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had perhaps the most disturbing development of all. She was successfully cultivating food crops using local soil that was supposedly toxic to all known life forms. Her small garden plot was thriving in conditions that should have been completely sterile. The mineral content is actually quite good once you neutralize the acidic compounds, she explained while harvesting vegetables that were growing in what looked like pure poison. The soil composition reminds me of some challenging areas I've worked with in Australia. Animal behaviorist Dr. Susan Clark had achieved something that made the council question their own database. She had successfully approached and began studying the pack behavior of creatures classified as impossible to observe due to extreme hostility. The predators that had torn apart reconnaissance drones were allowing her to watch their social interactions from close range. They're actually quite intelligent, Susan reported while sitting within striking distance of beasts that had single-handedly destroyed entire military units. Once you understand their communication patterns, they're no more aggressive than African wild dogs. The monitoring stations registered readings that shouldn't have been possible. The human stress levels weren't just stable, they were decreasing. Some volunteers were showing biometric patterns consistent with people who were genuinely enjoying themselves. Most disturbing of all were the sounds coming from the human camp. Where previous species had filled the communication channels with screams, prayers, and desperate pleas for evacuation, the humans could be heard laughing. By the second week, the impossible had become impossible to ignore. The human settlement on Tormentus Prime no longer resembled a desperate survival camp. It looked like a functioning research station that happened to be built on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Mark Thompson had done something that made the council's engineers question their own training. He had built power collectors that actually harvested energy from Tormentus Prime's violent electrical storms. The same lightning that had destroyed previous species' equipment was now providing steady electricity to the human camp. Simple electromagnetic collection principles, Mark explained while adjusting his improvised power grid during a storm that would have reduced most beings to ash. We use similar systems in tornado-prone areas back home. Just had to account for the higher voltage here. The council's technical specialists stared at their instruments in bewilderment. The power output readings showed the humans were generating more electricity than some small cities consumed. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had achieved something even more disturbing. Her botanical experiments had succeeded beyond all reasonable expectations. She was not only growing earth crops in Tormentus Prime's supposedly lethal soil, but she had begun cultivating the local plant life for food production. Once you understand the chemical processes, it's straightforward agriculture, Jennifer explained while tending to plants that previous researchers had classified as approach equals certain death. The mineral content here is actually superior to many earth soils. These indigenous species just needed proper cultivation techniques. The sight of humans calmly eating salads made from Tormentus Prime vegetation caused several council members to request extended medical leave. But perhaps the most shocking development came from Dr. Susan Clark's work with the local predators. She had done something that defied every piece of conventional wisdom about Tormentus Prime's fauna. She had domesticated them. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy's greatest warriors were now helping the humans with daily tasks. Six-legged wolves with acidic saliva were being used as pack animals. Flying predators that had destroyed aircraft were delivering messages between different parts of the human settlement. The social structures are remarkably complex, Susan reported while hand-feeding treats to a creature that resembled a cross between a tiger and a scorpion. Once you establish yourself as part of the pack hierarchy, they're actually quite cooperative. Reminds me of working with wild wolves in Yellowstone. The galactic audience had stopped placing bets on when the humans would fail. New betting pools opened on increasingly absurd questions. Would the humans turn Tormentus Prime into a vacation resort? Would they declare it the new capital of human space? Would they somehow make the planet less dangerous than most civilized worlds? Colonel James Mitchell had established something unprecedented in the trial's history, a functional military outpost. He was not just defending against Tormentus Prime's dangers, he was actively patrolling and securing territory. Areas that had been considered completely uninhabitable were now under human control. Standard area denial tactics, Mitchell explained while leading a patrol through terrain that had swallowed entire armies. You identify the threat patterns, establish control points, and maintain regular patrols. The local predators respect strength once you demonstrate it properly. The fact that humans were conducting routine military operations on Tormentus Prime made several galactic civilizations nervous about humanity's potential military capabilities. Dr. Robert Hayes had made discoveries that were revolutionizing galactic understanding of extremophile biology. The toxic pools that had dissolved previous expeditions' equipment were yielding organisms that could survive in environments previously thought uninhabitable. These life forms are remarkable, Robert reported while collecting samples from waters that could strip metal plating. They've developed biological processes that could revolutionize everything from waste treatment to terraforming. This research could benefit every species in the galaxy. The irony was not lost on Council Prime Valerian. The test designed to prove worthiness was producing scientific breakthroughs that could advance galactic civilization by centuries. Dr. Alice Foster had established weather monitoring stations across the planet and was providing accurate forecasts of Tormentus Prime's supposedly unpredictable climate patterns. Storms that had appeared without warning for millennia were now being tracked and predicted with scientific precision. The atmospheric dynamics follow clear meteorological principles, Alice explained while working through a blizzard that registered temperatures cold enough to freeze most beings solid. The patterns are complex but not random. With proper monitoring equipment, we can predict weather events days in advance. The human stress levels continued to puzzle the monitoring teams. Not only were they stable, but several volunteers were showing psychological profiles consistent with people on vacation. Dr. Helen Carter was heard humming while studying volcanic activity that would have sent geologists from most species fleeing in terror. The mineral formations here are absolutely fascinating, Helen reported while standing at the edge of an active lava flow. The geological processes are similar to Hawaii's volcanic systems, just more active. The research possibilities are endless. By day 20, the humans had achieved something that redefined what was possible on Tormentus Prime. They had begun basic terraforming operations. Small areas around their settlement were becoming more hospitable, not through advanced technology, but through simple environmental management techniques. Sarah Bennett had done something that made the council question their understanding of physics. She had stabilized several geological fault lines using controlled detonations and structural engineering principles. Earthquake zones that had been active for millions of years were now seismically stable. Basic seismic engineering, Sarah explained while monitoring equipment placed directly over what had been one of the planet's most dangerous fault systems. We use similar techniques in earthquake-prone cities on Earth. Just had to scale up the procedures. The galactic community was beginning to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented. These humans weren't just surviving the ultimate test of galactic civilization. They were treating it like a challenging but manageable engineering project. The most disturbing part for many observers was how genuinely happy the humans appeared. Their daily reports included jokes, casual observations about the weather, and requests for additional research time. Several volunteers had asked if their families could visit once permanent facilities were established. Council Prime Valerian found himself facing a philosophical crisis. If humans could turn Tormentus Prime into what appeared to be a thriving research colony, what did that say about every other species in the galaxy? What did it say about the test itself? On day 28, with only 2 days remaining in the trial that had broken every civilization in galactic history, Ambassador Margaret Thompson sent a transmission that would forever change how the galaxy viewed the concept of impossible challenges. Council Prime Valerian, her voice carried clearly through the ship's communication system, sounding remarkably cheerful for someone supposedly fighting for survival on the deadliest planet known to exist. We have an unusual request. The council chamber fell into absolute silence. Previous species' final transmissions had been desperate pleas for early evacuation, frantic goodbye messages to their homeworlds, or incoherent screaming. No one had ever made requests during the final days of the Tormentus Prime trial. Dr. Hayes's marine biology team has made some absolutely groundbreaking discoveries about extremophile evolution, Margaret continued conversationally. Dr. Carter's geological surveys have identified mineral deposits that could revolutionize construction materials across the galaxy. We were wondering if we could extend the trial period. Council Aide Therion dropped his datapad. The sound echoed through the shocked silence of the chamber. The research opportunities here are remarkable, Margaret went on. Another few weeks would allow us to complete studies that could benefit every civilization in the galaxy. This planet is turning out to be far more valuable than anyone realized. Council Prime Valerian stared at his communication panel, certain he had misheard. In over 2,000 years of administering this trial, no species had ever requested to stay longer on Tormentus Prime. Most begged to leave before the trial even officially began. You wish to remain on Tormentus Prime voluntarily? Valerian asked slowly, his translator struggling with concepts it had never needed to process before. Absolutely, Margaret replied with enthusiasm that made several council members require medical attention. Tom has discovered some absolutely spectacular geological formations that would be perfect for advanced climbing expeditions. Alice says the atmospheric research possibilities here are unlimited. And honestly, several team members have asked if they can bring their families for extended research vacations once we establish permanent facilities. The word vacation caused Ambassador Thrix of the Peaceful Assembly to faint completely. The idea of anyone voluntarily bringing their loved ones to Tormentus Prime was beyond comprehension. Dr. Robert Hayes's voice joined the transmission. This environment is remarkably hospitable once you understand its natural patterns. The biodiversity is incredible. The extremophile organisms here could revolutionize biotechnology, medicine, and environmental science across the entire galaxy. Hospitable, repeated Council Prime Valerian in a voice barely above a whisper. Colonel Mitchell added his perspective with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing a routine training exercise. It's certainly challenging, but nothing worse than some of the survival courses we run on Earth. The Australian outback is actually more dangerous in some ways. At least here you can see most of the threats coming from a distance. The comparison between Tormentus Prime and a place humans considered suitable for training exercises sent shock waves through the galactic community. Emergency sessions were called on dozens of worlds to discuss what this meant for their understanding of human capabilities. Dr. Helen Carter's excited voice crackled through the communication system. The geological activity here is absolutely fascinating. We've identified at least 12 different mineral types that don't exist anywhere else in known space. The commercial applications alone could fund scientific research for centuries. As the 30-day trial period reached its official conclusion, the humans filed their final reports with the enthusiasm of researchers who had stumbled onto the discovery of a lifetime. Their settlement had grown into a fully functional research station with sustainable power systems, food production facilities, and even recreational areas. The galactic audience watched in stunned amazement as the human volunteers reluctantly prepared for extraction. Several openly complained about having to leave just when their research was getting interesting. Others submitted formal proposals for permanent assignment to Tormentus Prime colonization projects. The mineral wealth alone makes this planet incredibly valuable for galactic development, Dr. Helen Carter explained in her final geological report. With proper industrial development, Tormentus Prime could become a major manufacturing and research center. The energy resources here are practically unlimited. Dr. Susan Clark's final transmission included a request that shocked even the human supporters. The predator species here are remarkable. I'd like to return with a proper xenobiology team to continue behavioral studies. Some of these creatures show intelligence levels that suggest they might be suitable for domestication and partnership programs. As the transport ships arrived to collect the humans, Council Prime Valerian realized that everything he thought he knew about survival, adaptation, and the limits of biological possibility had just been casually dismissed by creatures who treated the ultimate test of galactic civilization like an interesting camping trip. The final transmission from the human team came as they prepared to leave Tormentus Prime's orbit. Dr. Jennifer Walsh's voice carried clearly through the communication system. Thank you for this incredible opportunity, Council. The research data we've collected here will keep our scientists busy for decades. When do we get to see some of the really challenging planets? The phrase really challenging planets caused 3 different species representatives to request immediate psychiatric evaluation. Ambassador Margaret Thompson's closing words to the Council would be quoted in history books for millennia. We sincerely appreciate the trial, Council Prime. Earth is honored to join the galactic community. Now, what other problems do you have that need solving? Our people love a good challenge. Council Prime Valerian sat in stunned silence, realizing he hadn't just witnessed the first successful completion of an impossible trial. He had watched beings so adapted to extreme conditions that they considered the galaxy's ultimate nightmare a pleasant research opportunity. The humans hadn't just passed the test. They had made it look easy.